Okay, so now it is time to start reading the pattern. So this page gives you an explanation of all of the markings on the pattern. So it will be helpful as you're following along in the pattern to reference this page to see if you need to do anything like make darts or how to pieces go together, all of those things. So this page will serve as like a key, almost like you would have on a map. It also gives you the next steps in the process. That it says that you should always use 5/8 seam allowance, so that makes sure you need to do that. And it tells you to pin and baste the seams together, tells you how to finish them, so it gives you all these stitches, right? And then here is where the pattern starts. Now we're not using interfacing on these patterns, so that means you want to start on step number 3. So you are going to stitch the darts for front 1, 11, 14, or 17. And we have front 1 because that is the pattern that we're doing. See, we're making vest A. If we were making vest C, we would be doing 11, 14, and 17. So the first thing I need to do is I need to transfer the dart markings onto the front half of the vest. So that's a little bit tricky, so I will show you how to transfer the dart edges. Here we go. So these are the dart marks on the pattern, see, because it's going to show me where to stitch the darts down. But I need to transfer them from this paper pattern onto my pattern. So I've flipped my fabric so that the right side is facing down because I want to draw my marks on the wrong side of my fabric. So I'm going to line my fabric back up here. And now I need to transfer these dots. And it's a little bit tricky to hold the camera and show you how I'm transferring the dots. Let me see if I can do this. So I have some dots here, so I know where the darts need to go. So I'm drawing dots underneath the fabric so I can match where they're gonna go. So I know this goes here, and then I lift it up and I mark my dart, and then I go here and I mark my darts, and then it's all the way up here, so I know. And sometimes the way that I like to mark the dart is I use the pin and I poke it straight through the paper because the pin will go through the paper. Right, so then when I lift up my paper, I can still see where the pin went through, and I can mark my dart, so it ends up in the right place. So now, on this fabric, you can kind of see the darts. So I'm going to want to draw a straight line from the dart points, so I know how to sew on my straight line. So I'm going to connect my dots here, like this, and connect my dots here like this, and connect them here like this, and then here as well. So now I have dart lines on the vest on the wrong side. It's very important you do this on the wrong side, otherwise it won't help you. Now I have to go do this on the other half of the vest, and then I will be back to show you how to sew. Okay, so I've drawn my dart lines on both sets of the fabric. So the next thing that I need to do is to pin them together because I'm going to sew my darts. So the way I do this is I poke, let's see if I can show you in the camera, because I want to make sure this side of the dart lines up with this side of the dart. So I'm stabbing, trying to stab through both of the dots so that my dart lines line up. So as I'm poking on one side, I'm making sure the pin is lining up with the fabric on the other side. So I'm pinching it in the appropriate place because I want to create this dart line all the way down or all the way up. So I'm going to pin all 4 of my darts and then I'm going to sew on the line. So see how I've got my darts, and I'm going to sew on this line. So once I do that for all 4 of them, I'm going to sew them together, and then I will move on to the next step, which is pressing my darts open. I have sewed the darts into these vests. As you can see, there's these on the back side. So then my next step for these darts is, because see how they're kind of lumpy, I need to get out the iron and iron them down. Okay, so now it is time to iron my pattern. I want to make sure that it is on the correct temperature. For the cotton, I can be on 6, and I just iron this open. This plate is hot. Be mindful when you're doing what you're doing that you do not burn your hands. You push down to iron because you want to flatten out your vest. And when you're done, you want to always make sure you tip that up, otherwise you will start to burn things. See, my iron is tipped upwards because you don't want that hot plate to burn things. So the next step is step number 4, which is to reinforce the corners, and then I'm going to move on to step 5, which says with right sides together, fold lower welt 2, which is this one, stitch the ends, trim. So I'm going to fold it in half like this, stitch the ends like that, then flip it the other way and trim it. So I'm going to do steps 5 and 6, and then I'll come back for step 7. Okay, so we've just finished this section. We've finished step 6. We are going to skip step 7, skip step 8, 9, and 10. We're not adding a pocket to this vest, and skip step 11. So we're going to do the upper welt, but we're going to do the lower welt as well. So the lower welt calls for a real pocket, but we're going to just do the upper welt twice because it's a fake welt. It's a fake pocket. So you need to pin the lower welt to the front, and you need to match the pin lines. So you're going to pin it to the front along these lines. So you're going to pin it, sew it down, then you will flip it up, and then you're going to stitch it up. So what's key with this one is that you need to have this nice color thread, because that color of the thread is actually going to show. So this pink that I've been using is actually going to show when I stitch it. So I might need to change the pink. So let me get everything pinned and I will show you what's next. I've pinned the welt in place. Now I'm going to stitch along this side and then flip it up. The welt is stitched down, and now I'm going to iron it up so it makes a fake looking pocket. Just like this. And I want to press it, and you will do a better job when you have 2 hands. Hold on, let me get 2 hands. Okay, so now it is time to stitch down right here and right here to make my fake pockets. So I will do that. You can pin them if that makes you feel more comfortable. And I'm going to top stitch them down, and it is important that you sew straight and that you back up so they are secure, because people may still try and use the fake pockets even though they're fake. So you do that on both sides. You want to follow the angle of the pocket as you go. Make sure you back up. And now I have a runaway bobbin. You have a set, or you have one fake pocket. I have 2 sets of fake pockets now. So I will repeat the process with the upper welt pockets, and which is the exact same thing that I just did, just with a smaller pieces. So I'm going to do that, and I will see you once I finished the upper welts. I have now pinned the upper welts to the vest, and I'm going to sew them down, flip them up, and then tack them where they need to go. So the faux pockets are now sewed down onto the front of the vest, and my next steps, I need to read the pattern. So I just finished step 16, and then the next says for collar and lapel B and C, but I'm not doing collar. I'm not doing vest B and C, so I can skip step 16, 17, 18, and I'm also skipping 19, 20, and then this says to collar D and F, which we're not making D and F either right now. So I'm skipping step 21, and I'm skipping to skip step 22. So now I'm jumping back to and working on step 23. So it says stitch back, which is piece 5, sections together at the center, back, stitch front and back at shoulders. All right, so that's what I am going to do. And I'm doing all of this with the lining fabric. So these are my lining fabrics, and I have stitched them together along this seam, because if you see, I can flip it open, and there is my seam. And this one, I also can flip it open and see they're sewn together. So my next step is to iron these open so that they are nice and flat for me to sew with.
Coach is not gonna carry you there?
What, that you can't find it?
Yeah.
No, he's not.
That sounds like a you problem, hence what you would say. Not.
Okay, so now I'm on step 27. So with right sides together, fold each belt, which is these are my belts, in half lengthwise and stitch along the long edge. So I need to fold these in half like this, and then stitch along this long edge. Then I need to fold on the fold lines, stitch across the unmarked end, trim, and then I have to turn the belts the right direction. All right, so I'm going to do all that and meet you back when I've done it. Okay, so now I've got the finished belt, and now I need to turn it the correct way. And the way I turn it the correct way is I'm using the not sharpened end of a pencil, and I'm making a little pocket with my fingers. I'm shoving this in to make a little like pocket for the pencil to go in, and then I'm going like this until the finished end comes out. And then I'm going to pull it to flip it. And now I am going to iron these down and then attach them. Okay, now we are moving on to step 24, which is stitch the front to back at the shoulder. So these are the front pieces, these green ones, and I am going to stitch them at the shoulder line like this. And I want to make sure that I've got right sides together so I can see that the pockets are here and the seam is here because I'm stitching right sides together. So I'm going to stitch here and then I'm going to stitch across the top here. So I'm going to do that. So these are stitched together on the top shoulder, and now I'm going to press them open and move on to step 25. Now am I on step 31, so I'm going to pin the belts back, matching small circles, and then baste them down. So I need to pin the belt straps. Whoops, it's hard to see because it's black. These are the belt straps, and this is the back. I know it's the back because it's attached to my turquoise. I'm going to pin them down right about here. I'm going to check where they go on the pattern, pin them down, and sew them right here. And then I also need to stitch the back. I'm going to do steps 32 as well. I'm going to stitch the front and back lining to the shoulder. So I'm going to do those two things, and then I will come back and show you what it looks like. Step 25 is the same as stitching the darts on the front side of the fabric. So I'm going to sew the darts in onto the lining of the fabric, and then I will meet you back here once I have sewed the darts in. And I've already done step 26. I sewed the lining together already. So the next one I will meet you back to show you is step 27. Okay, so now I'm on step 33 with right sides together, pin lining to the vest, stitch lower, front, neckline and armhole edges, trim understitch lining as far as possible. So I need to stitch along the bottom edge, these armholes, the neck, and the front edge. I'm leaving the side seams open. So I've got this already laid out on the floor, and I'm going to pin the other one on top of it, and then I will sew them all together. I stitched and turned the entire seam right way around, and now I need to press it, and then I'm going to do, I'm going to join the last steps. All right, this step says, starting 3 inches above the armhole seam and ending about 3 inches below the armhole seam at lower edge, stitch back to front at sides and lining edges in one continuous seam as shown. All right, so this one's pretty tricky. So I'm going to pin it together and show you what it should look like pinned. So I have my back and front like this together, but I want them. Okay, so for this next section, you need to pin your back to your side of your vest. Now, this is pretty tricky to do because you don't want to sew them like this, because if you sew them like this, the raw edge is out. You want them to be sewn so that the smooth edge is shown. So eventually it'll look like this, and then you will have an opening here, kind of the same way we flipped the bags. And in the next video, or actually I think I'm just gonna link a video that shows you how to blind stitch this closed. So you'll blind stitch it closed, but that'll be a following video. So for this, what you need to do is you need to pin and I want to make sure that I pin the green. So what I'm doing is I'm putting the back with the tie face up like this, and then I'm putting the green right on top of it. And I'm trying to line these up as best I can. And then on the inside of these, not all four, I'm only pinning my 2 interior pieces. So I'm skipping this one, I'm pinning these 2, and then I'm leaving this one here. So I'm gonna pin here, pin, and I'm gonna pin all along here. And I'm gonna pin here, ouch. And I'm gonna pin here. So I'm pinning all along on the inside, all the way up into where the seam meets here. And then I'm gonna sew this, and then I'm gonna keep pinning because I think it's easier to do this in parts. So I'm gonna take you with me and do this in real time so you can see how I have to fuss with it. Oh, this isn't plugged in anymore. Hold on. Wait, is it? Now it's plugged in. Okay, so now I'm just sewing what I pinned, because it's pretty tricky to do this. You may have to come find me for help, but so I put my thing down. So as you saw, I adjusted as I went, as I was sewing. So now I'm going to pull my pins like this, because you don't want to accidentally leave a pin inside of somebody's costume, because that would hurt. But so now I have the front and the back are sewn together, but I still like this. See, front and back sewn together. I still need to do the inside. So, and I need to leave a little bit to, sorry, this is really hard to do in front of a camera. I need to leave a little bit to turn. So I'm going to try and pin up. So this is where I stopped, and then I'm going to continue pinning up as far as the fabric is going to let me. Because at some point it will get too tight and I won't be able to sew anymore. So I'm gonna pin up as far as the fabric will let me on this side, and then I'll sew this side down, and then I'll do the same for the other side. It's kind of key that you do this in multiple steps with pinning and then sewing. Otherwise, it gets really tangled and confusing and easy to accidentally sew the wrong thing. And then we will become best friends with the seam ripper, which you may already be best friends with the seam ripper because the project bags. All right, so then I'm sewing it down, and it's pretty tricky, I'm not gonna lie. I'm pulling my pins again, and then so I've got this side going now, doing pretty good with this side. So I need to pin up as much as I can of the other side so I don't have nearly as much to blind stitch closed, because I am not a fan of blind stitching. But if you like hand sewing, then it may be not too big of a deal for you. All right, so I've got mine pinned again as best as I could manage. So you can see I've got it pinned right there, and that's only about 1 inch. But if I sew it on the machine, that's still 1 inch of blind stitching that I do not have to do, which I am much happier about. So then I am all done with this side. Okay. So I can now turn it, being careful that I don't have pins in there. So now you see I've got this gap, and I'm going to need to stitch it closed, but because I don't want to stitch it right down onto the other one, I need to iron it, and then I will blind stitch it. So I also have the same thing going on the other side that I sewed first. I have a hole here. I'm going to iron that down as well, and then we're done with all the machine sewing on this. So the next steps are to blind stitch the interior of the vest, these two interiors here, this one and this one, and then we need to attach buttons, and we're going to use snaps for the front of this to hold them together instead of true buttonholes, because then we can adjust how much this vest closes. Like if it needs to close a little bit more because the person's a little bit petiter, we can do that. So I'm not going to attach the snaps until we determine whose vest this is, but I will attach the buttons. However, I don't have buttons here at school, so the next video will probably be tomorrow, and I think I'm going to do a separate button video. So I will link a blind stitching video because I'm left-handed, so it is not helpful for me to teach you how to blind stitch. You need to watch someone who's right-handed. So I'm going to iron this, blind stitches close, and then I will show you what it looks like at the most finished point it can be. All right, so I have finished this vest. I stitched up the insides. I've clipped the majority of the threads. So this would be the time, if you're in my tech theater class, that you come bring me the vest, and then we are going to try it on the actor who I think the vest is for. And then we'll decide if we put buttons and snaps on it and what comes next. So yes, when you've reached this point in class, come show me your vest and we will go from there. There'll be another section of videos on how to sew on buttons and snaps. So thank you so much for joining us. And if you're my tech theater students, good luck.